Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Montana Farm Bureau Field Notes podcast. My name is Haley Droogsma, and I'm back today with another episode of our special podcast series this week for the American Farm Bureau's ASAP, or Agriculture Safety Awareness Program Week. Today's theme is Rest and Refuel. Nutrition is an important aspect of the lives of farmers and ranchers, but sometimes our own personal nutrition as producers can take a back seat to that of the animals we care for. I have a very special guest here with me to dig into this topic. Joining me today is Cassie Beene, who is a nutritionist at CHS. Hi, Cassie. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for being on today. For those who may not know your role at CHS, can you kind of give a day-to-day look at what you do in your job as an animal nutrition consultant?
For sure. So I work as a territory consultant for CHS Nutrition. Our plant is based out of Great Falls, Montana, and I cover central Montana. There's a lot of variation day to day, but the gist of it is I work with both producers and then farm stores and feed stores and help them balance and look at different types of livestock nutrition. So out of the Great Falls plant, we are primarily beef cattle nutrition focused, but we do manufacture a variety of other livestock feed products.
So we're here for the ASAP, Agriculture Safety Awareness Program Week theme from the American Farm Bureau. And today's theme is Rest and Refuel. And I kind of want to draw some parallels between livestock and feed nutrition versus human nutrition, kind of some differences in how we treat those two and similarities as well. So when you hear today's theme, Rest and Refuel, what immediately comes to mind from a nutrition standpoint, both in the livestock world and in the human world?
So I think when we're talking about both human nutrition and livestock nutrition, the fundamentals are the same, right? We all have baseline protein and caloric requirements. And while the calculations or the ways that we may go about calculating those requirements differ between like beef cattle and ourselves, the underlying principle is the same. And so when I think rest and refuel, I think of probably like fueling our body from a nutrition standpoint, and then making sure we're also meeting not only like caloric and protein needs, but also our mineral and vitamin requirements as well in order to optimize performance and health and well-being.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels to draw. I think overall, farmers and ranchers are so dedicated to their livestock and sometimes aren't quite as dedicated to themselves and their own personal nutrition, regardless of whether you're running on no sleep or it's a bajillion degrees below outside. Farmers and ranchers are always the first to go out, feed cows, whatever, put some of their nutritional needs, their livestock's nutritional needs above themselves. Why do you think that might be? We're often less intentional about fueling ourselves than we are our livestock.
I mean, I think our livestock are our livelihood. And not only that, but they're also something that we generally are attached to and find a lot of meaning in. And so it comes naturally. But I think that's a great point that you make. We spend a lot of time talking about diets and whether we're meeting protein and energy requirements. And then we spend copious amounts of time and money and thought going into what does our mineral program look like? Are we meeting these animals' vitamin and mineral needs? Depending on the operation, we may even switch mineral up depending on the time of year, as well as stage of production. But those are pieces that we don't always replicate and do for ourselves. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely crossover. And I guess in the same way that we supplement cattle from a vitamin and mineral standpoint and think about nutrition strategically, we should think about it kind of in a similar way for ourselves, right? We expect our cattle to perform, but we also have to perform on a daily basis. And it's important that we are functioning well and nourishing our body properly and getting enough sleep so that we can show up both in the workplace and for our own businesses, but then also for our family and friends and the people that we love and care about.
I think that's something that we might overlook too when you mentioned sort of the cyclical nature of some of the nutrition that we apply to our livestock. That might be something that we overlook kind of as farmers and ranchers, because our bodies have cycles, different stages of development that require different things, and that might be something that is overlooked sometimes. When you are building a ration for cattle for a customer, what sort of factors are you balancing? You sort of touched on this, and what recommendations can we make to farmers and ranchers balancing their own diets based on that?
Sure. So a lot of times when we talk production, particularly in the cow-calf scenario, the conversation will be very like seasonal focused. So like what time of year are we in? What phase of the production cycle are we in? And what therefore are we expecting out of those cattle? And I think the same could apply to us, maybe less of even from a nutrition standpoint, but more about like the principles that we apply on a daily basis. So if I think about this time of year, most of us are calving. While we have a very favorably nice winter this year, generally on a normal year, we're kind of all suffering from like the winter blues. It's cold, we're sleep deprived. And I think just taking time to like rest and refuel and take time for ourselves is super important when we're in these busier seasons of the year.
I would totally echo that. That's something that I think we, again, can overlook sometimes. And I think even in those real strenuous situations, as producers, people still expect like maximum capacity out of themselves. Whereas when you're looking at livestock, if their feed cycle isn't up to par, if grazing's not up to par, whatever it might be, we wouldn't expect the same performance out of them that we would expect of ourselves when we're nutritionally deficient. Why do you think that is, that we expect so much of ourselves and we don't apply that same mentality to our livestock?
Frankly, I think a lot of us are just busy and it's not something that we prioritize and take the time to think about on a regular basis. And maybe too, we feel like we don't have the knowledge or like the self-awareness to like look into that. But I think for the majority, it's just something that we tend to put on a back burner, right or wrong. It tends to be the last thing we think about or exert mental energy towards.
It's easy to let those things kind of slip into the background of your day-to-day life. And like you mentioned, we are busy people, so tough to take the time, but I think it's definitely worth it when you choose to do something like that.
100%.
Kind of along the same lines, expecting so much out of ourselves. Maybe this is an easier comparison for farmers and ranchers to grasp too. What happens biologically to livestock when they're underfed, dehydrated, or stressed, and how is that similar to what happens in the human body?
Yeah, frequently the first thing we would see happen is we're going to see a loss in immune function, right? And the same is true of humans. If we are sleep deprived, stressed, whether mentally or nutritionally, the body's going to start to suffer and our immune system is going to take a hit. And so a lot of the times we're going to become ill. That's probably why, like, particularly during the winter months, everybody talks about, cold and flu season. I think a lot of that probably correlates to like winter months tend to be busier. They're the months that we tend to take less time for ourselves. We're not spending time outside in the sunshine generally, and we see our bodies respond accordingly.
Yeah, obviously immunity is a huge deal in livestock and humans alike. If we're not performing our best due to stress, sickness, whatever it might be, then that will, impact our livestock indirectly from our ability to be able to take care of them, take care of ourselves. I kind of want to wrap this up with one more super important aspect of resting and refueling, both in cattle and in humans. Water is one of the most critical pieces of livestock nutrition. Why is hydration such a big deal for producers working long hours outdoor and cattle alike?
When we think about what water does in the body, it plays a super critical role in pretty much any type of like metabolic function. And so anytime we deprive water or water quality, even if it's questionable, they have access to it. If we don't have proper levels of consumption, then the body's going to suffer like biologically. And so again, when we talk about livestock, we generally spend a lot of time, making sure that water access is adequate. So this time of year, we're usually concerned about, de-icing stuff, making sure water is flowing and running. And then during the summer times, it's more of making sure we have water accessible to everything. But the same, I think, can be true of humans. I would say the majority of the population probably doesn't drink enough water. If we were to look at how many ounces you should be consuming and drinking per day, particularly during the winter months when it's chilly. And so, yeah, I think like water consumption, would be an easy target or goal to like maybe focus on initially. Yeah, and would just be like an easy first initial step if you're looking at improving your health and refueling and resting your body, trying to measure and do a better job in taking water on a consistent basis throughout the day. would be an easy initial step.
I totally agree. I think that's an awesome first recommendation. If you're just trying to take one step in the right direction, something that's pretty simple to implement in your day-to-day life, just a little bit of increased discipline would be all it requires. So
the other component to that too is like sometimes when we talk about health, both in terms of like your operation, but also your personal health, it can be a little bit overwhelming, like all the different advice and things to do and implement and try. And so my advice to anybody would be to start with baby steps. And I think that looking at water consumption and your hydration or dehydration levels would be a good first initial step in the right direction.
I mean, we've been through this whole thing on this episode today. All these different aspects easily can get overwhelming, and you can see how that would maybe be tough on producers, like you mentioned, their operation or their personal nutrition. So it makes a lot of sense. Just taking baby steps, one small step in the right direction at a time can make a huge difference, especially if you're kind of chipping away at it over time. So yes, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this was a wonderful conversation about kind of some parallels between livestock and human nutrition and how we can take better care of ourselves and thereby better care of our animals on our operations.